Hello, hello. Checking the sound again. If you guys can hear me, can you just type yes into the chat box and let me know this is all kosher? Wonderful. Chris, great to see you, man. Wonderful. All right, well, you guys are on time, and I'm going to reward you by getting started right away. Not going to dilly or dally. Cool. Well, thanks for joining, guys. I'm super excited about this. It's been a while since I've coalesced my thoughts around this. I talk about it a lot in small pieces and I write about it a little bit, but I haven't put all of these thoughts together in one cohesive package in a long time. So I'm super excited for what we have here. If you have any specific questions that you do want me to cover, please leave them in the Ask a Question section over to the left on the bottom. And I'll check that periodically and make sure that I'm speaking to those things or touching on those things. I think we will have some time at the end for question and answer. Just to set the expectation up front, I am going to offer a way that we can work together at the end of this, but I made this as dense and useful as possible. So take all you can from this. And if you want to move forward and work with me afterwards, great. If you don't, also fine. I want to make this as useful as possible for the next hour. All right, I'm going to dive in. I'm going to focus my screen here. Wonderful. So today we are talking about personal branding. And as I've said time and time again, and as I'll have a title slide here shortly, whether you realize it or not, you are creating a personal brand right now. And so it serves you well to be thoughtful and intentional about that so that you can drive that in a way that you can leverage and benefit from directly. So who am I? Why am I here? My name is Jay. I'm a writer and community builder. I write a daily newsletter. I'm building a community called Unreal Collective. And I've been involved with Startup Weekend and the Create Columbus Commission here locally, both pretty large communities, especially Startup Weekend, for the last 5 years. Unreal Collective, if I can pitch that very quickly, is a community for people who are action-oriented. We have a 12-week intensive to take people from point A to point B. And what that means different things for different people. Basically, you are working on an independent project. And over the course of 12 weeks, I put you into a group of 4 other individuals, not including myself. And every week for 12 weeks, we meet as a group and work through challenges that you're facing on your project or business. Our calls look a little bit like this. There's 6 people on the call, yourself, 4 others, plus me. We talk through exactly what it is that your project is struggling with or what's going well, how we can help, how we can get you feedback, and setting an initial goal setting and road mapping exercise to start the 12 weeks. We go week by week for 12 weeks towards that goal. And at the end, we have a little bit of a showcase just to celebrate the progress you've made. Every week on the call, you declare action items. And then to start the call the next week, we check against them. So every call is 60 minutes, the first 10 minutes checking against last week's action items, the last 10 minutes declaring action items for the following week. We track those in a public spreadsheet, so there's plenty of accountability built in there to make sure that you are making the progress that you are announcing that you want to make. We also have a community Slack channel that we communicate between calls synchronously or asynchronously. So basically, think of the calls themselves as like a virtual accelerator and think of the Slack community as sort of a virtual co-working space. But it's a lot of fun. And as you can see, this is Ryan and his son, Henry. Ryan was working on a project, not Henry, but we have a lot of fun and we get to be pretty close as a group. Okay, now for the good stuff, now that I'm done pitching Unreal Collective, I've been thinking about personal branding for a while now, going back to this, what I would call a pretty bad TEDx talk back in 2013, which is literally titled the same thing as this talk because while I think at the time I was a little nascent in how I was thinking about personal branding, I was pretty much right on in that you should control your own brand so that you can leverage it and actually make it work for you and not against you. And I've also been presenting myself on the internet for a long time. Fun slide of the things that I was doing super early on, really as a kid, playing with GeoCities websites, writing on Xanga as a blog, playing around with MySpace as everyone did, but also AOL Instant Messenger, MSN Instant Messenger, and even online gaming super early on in PC time. And I had to be very cognizant and careful over how I presented myself online. This is my first GeoCities website, which is pretty gross. I believe I gave the Hulk a pretty good review on this page, though. This is the first website that I built for myself several years ago, and it's come quite a long way. This looks a lot better. And so I've been very intentional and thoughtful around how I've presented myself for a long time, and it's come with a lot of strong insight over the last couple of years, really understanding why things work the way that they do. Since March, I've been writing a daily newsletter. Somebody asked about blogging as a way of building a personal brand. I do think that this has contributed strongly to my personal brand, but there are a lot of ways to go about doing that. So I'll touch on this a little bit later. But I've written every day for my email list since March, which is a lot of content. And it really has done a lot for me in terms of meeting new people and building up my credibility. So you get the point. Been on the internet, I do internet things. Today, I'm not necessarily going to talk directly about followers. I'm not going to talk directly about getting new followers. I'm not going to talk about getting new likes. I'm not going to talk about getting subscribers. Instead, I'm going to talk about messaging and positioning and trust and building relationships, because this is really what is at the core of building a personal brand. Not these just vanity metrics of, let me pump up these numbers, because there's a ton of ways you can do that artificially, most of them. And if they aren't artificial, they are almost certainly pretty shallow. And it's not really building your brand so much as just building up a vanity metric that doesn't necessarily serve you. So like I said at the outset, whether intended or not, you are already building a personal brand. So to give you an example, let's think about a brand like Red Bull. When you think about Red Bull, what do you think about? I'm going to shrink this a little bit so I can still see your guys' comments. What comes to mind when you think about Red Bull? Red Bull gives you wings, or this will give me energy. That's pretty standard. Red Bull is a pretty well-known brand. But think about a table with a wobbly leg at a coffee shop that you go to a lot. If you go to that coffee shop often enough, you know exactly which table has a wobbly leg, and you're not going to sit at that table because you've had multiple experiences with that wobbly leg, and that's what you know about that table. You've already had experiences. You've created an understanding in your mind with that table, even though there is no brand for that table. There is no Red Bull gives you wings for that table with the wobbly leg. It's just a table. Both products are building a brand in your mind, because interactions are what builds a brand in your mind, your touch points, how you're interacting with that brand in the wild or that product. A brand, if you think about it, is a promise. It is something that is promised to you. Take a pair of Levi's jeans. This is an example I've given a few times. If you take any pair of jeans, even a pair of like Arizona jeans, some of the more lower tier, their promise to you is that they are going to be warm pants. They will be flexible. They will give you full coverage of your legs. The promise of Levi's jeans is not necessarily the same, right? Because if people are looking for a promise that they just want to be warm and covered, they wouldn't care about Arizona jeans versus Levi jeans. The Levi's promise is that it's going to give you an air of taste, that it's going to make you feel like you have good fashion, that it's going to make you have more confidence. That's the promise that Levi's is making you versus Arizona. But when you think about a brand, it's really what it is in your mind that it is promising you that it's going to bring to that interaction. That wobbly leg table, it's promising you that you're going to have a hard time writing in your notebook or that you're going to spill your coffee. So think about this in terms of you being a product. And I talk about this a lot because it's a big, important shift of your mind. You are a product. And since you are a product, you need to think about these questions fairly intentionally. Why would somebody buy your product? What problem is your product being hired to solve? Would they recommend your product to a friend? What market are you serving with your product? Are you a luxury good or a budget product? i.e., how are you priced? How scarce is your product? Is your product consistent and trustworthy? And how strong is your brand? I know a lot of that sounds esoteric, but if you really want to dig into any of these, when somebody hires you to do work, they are hiring you to fix a problem. They are hiring you based on your brand promise that you're going to fix the problem. So what is the problem that people are hiring you to fix? What is the value you're bringing to them? And it doesn't mean that they're paying you necessarily. It doesn't mean you're bringing in a salary. Sometimes people ask me if I know a good UX designer that I can recommend for a local startup. They're hiring me for that problem because my brand is that I know people in the space. That's a promise that I've made, that I know people who can be helpful. And we can dig into a little bit all of this later if you guys are interested. A strong brand comes from consistency. A strong brand comes from something that is solving that problem on a consistent basis and fulfilling that promise on a consistent basis. So, as I said, remember, brands are a promise. Are you consistent in fulfilling your promise? Are you consistent in, if someone comes to me and thinks that I'm going to have the answer for a UX designer that they can refer to a local startup, if I can consistently give them the name of somebody that would be good in that position, I'm consistently fulfilling that promise. But if they come to me and after asking me 3 times in a row, I don't have the answer, I'm no longer solving that problem. They're no longer going to hire me to solve that problem because I'm no longer consistent in fulfilling my promise. To give you another personal example, one major aspect of my personal brand is honesty. So every day I need to fulfill that promise of being honest. Your brand can be any of these things, and I put them kind of side by side to show the different ends of the spectrum. You may be somebody that is kind, or you may be someone that's rude. You may be funny, or you may be annoying. You may be discreet, or you may be sort of gossipy. You could be positive, or you could be negative. You could be generous, or you could be selfish. You could be thoughtful, or you could be thoughtless. You could be honest, or you could be a liar. And the end here, which I'll touch on a little bit more here, is you may be authentic, or you may be inauthentic. All of these things are aspects that you can be. These can all be part of your brand promise. And you can be proactive about choosing them and being consistent about them so that they become part of your brand. Like I said, it all comes down to consistency. If you're any of those traits, if you're any of them consistently, it's going to become a part of your brand, whether intentionally or not. And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. You may be kind of a jerk sometimes. And if you're consistently kind of a jerk, that is becoming part of your brand right now, whether you're intentionally saying, I want to be known as a jerk or not. Just because you're not saying that I'm going to portray myself as a jerk proactively on social media, if you're not being intentional and consistently not a jerk, it doesn't matter because people are interacting with your brand, they're having interactions and they're forming their own, what they think to be promise that you are fulfilling on a consistent basis. Okay, so you get that. You need to act in a way that's consistent. Now I want to talk about congruency, which is a pretty subtle distinction. You may even Google on Merriam-Webster and tell me that they're the same thing. And you know what? You may be right, but I'm going to call them different things right now. Consistency versus congruency. A big threat to building a strong brand is exhibiting incongruence. And Kevin, you asked a minute ago on the questions about social media. And social media is a spot where you can really show some incongruence. I'm going to check the questions real quick to make sure I'm not touching on anything that can be talked about right now. Cool. I'll get to that later. But social media is a big place where you can exhibit incongruence. And another common example is writing. And I bring this up because, like I said, I've been writing for months and months and months every day consistently. And since I've started writing, I've seen a lot of other people start writing too, which is awesome. It's an amazing habit. And so I always dig in and I check and look at their content and see how they're going about things and how they're doing things and how they're writing. And what I find is there's a lot of incongruency in their writing. And what I mean is, let's say that if you and I were talking and I said to you, I went to Starbucks yesterday after lunch and I saw this adorable dog. That's a story that I could see myself saying, and just speaking to you, that's the way I would see it. I went to Starbucks yesterday after lunch and I saw this adorable dog. But there are a lot of people who, when they go from spoken interaction to written language, they no longer are congruent in the way that they talk, in their voice. I went to Starbucks yesterday after lunch and saw this adorable dog becomes, following the conclusion of a decadent meal, I took a short stroll to the local coffee shop where I came upon a beautiful canine. You know, like they throw in all of this fluffy language that is maybe more technically correct. Like maybe from an pure English and literature perspective is more technically correct or interesting. But it's just not the way that people receive your brand. It's not the way that people hear your voice. If you don't talk this way when you talk to somebody one-on-one, you shouldn't write this way if you're trying to just share a message over written language. Your voice should be congruent in whatever medium I receive it. And so to the point in the questions about blogging, that means that your voice should be congruent across all of these mediums: personal interaction, writing, tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram captions, Instagram videos, Snapchat videos. Like the way I'm explaining this right now, if I went onto a Instagram video and talked about it differently and you change my language there, it's just weird. And people see that and they're saying, I don't know what Jay is or who Jay is or how he actually interacts. I don't feel like I have a good understanding of like who he is and how to expect. Like I feel like he's fake. He's faking it. He's putting on a persona. And so that incongruency undermines trust. If people don't think that they can expect consistency from you, expect congruency from you, and know what your voice is going to be like, it's going to undermine the trust they have in you. And if I lose trust, you failed on your promise. Now I'm going to change what I think your brand stands for. The promise that I thought you were fulfilling, you're no longer fulfilling. And so I'm going to either think, I'm just going to change what I think your promise is, frankly, whether I'm even doing that intentionally or not. A lot of people, that's the other thing. A lot of people aren't doing this intentionally. This is all sort of on a subconscious level. Because, you know, if I lose trust because you're communicating with me in person differently versus your written word, and I don't trust you anymore, I'm not going to necessarily register this thought of this person is fake. I actually think that they are this way. It just happens on a subconscious level, and it changes the way I will interact with you following that. I know this all sounds kind of hard to keep track of and be intentional about, and you're right, it is. Like it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to be that way because there's so much expectation built on social media, and people think you need to share all the time. You share all these messages, but at the same time, we're really only incentivized to share the highlights and the best of things. And so we want to make these like amazing captions and say these amazing things to make people think we're doing amazing work. And we want to sound smart when we do that. But, you know, if you're not being consistent and your voice isn't being congruent, it doesn't matter. And so here's my secret weapon, and here's what I would recommend be your secret weapon too. And it's called authenticity. This isn't super revolutionary, but hear me out. Authenticity is just being genuine. It's being real. It's not being misleading, and it's being honest. It's saying, you know, I'm going to level with you one-on-one. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to represent myself the way that I feel naturally doing it. I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm not going to mislead you. I prefer authenticity because I can act naturally. I can be myself. When a situation comes up, I can act out of my secure identity and out of the way that I naturally want to react. And I can just be myself. That's amazing. And as a pretty rational person, that means that sort of by default, I'm being consistent. Because if I am consistently being myself, I'm going to be delivering on whatever promise that I'm putting in people's minds or whatever they're expecting me to do. It removes personal cognitive dissonance. If I am not authentic and I know that I'm trying to represent myself intentionally as smart or like super funny, and I'm forcing that, then I have to try all the time. And when a situation comes up where I say, I need to be smart here, I need to be funny here, I have this like cognitive dissonance of, but I know that's not me, but I know that takes effort. What if they know that I'm lying or forcing it? And I just don't want that. I want to be very natural. I want to be myself. And I don't want to have that unnecessary cognitive burden of having to essentially keep up a lie. So to me, honesty is just easier. Authenticity, it's easier. Now, you can build a brand by being consistent and inauthentic. That's totally true. Consistency is really at the core of everything. If you want to be consistently inauthentic and you can pull that off, you can build that brand. But people will probably know, because people on some level have a pretty good natural judgment of character, or at least honesty. People just know when you're forcing it, when you're not being yourself, because it's really hard to be absolutely consistent. It's really hard to be congruent with the way you're communicating. And when that incongruency happens, that's just a red flag, even if it's in the recesses of our mind. And we say, okay, that person is not who they say they are. On the flip side, people are naturally attracted to authenticity. It's just way more attractive. We aspire to it. We see people who are authentic and we think of them as sort of brave and courageous. And we say, I wish I could be so comfortable being myself. And it's just really attractive to people. You end up building a stronger brand that way because people see what you're doing and they say, I want to be around that more. It's refreshing. And this is an important point that I've talked about a lot with some friends of mine, because I talk about authenticity and sometimes they tell me I'm full of shit. Authenticity does not mean transparency. It is not the same as transparency. And so let me break that down. You can still draw your own boundaries in whatever way that you want. Let's talk about your personal finances. You could say, I'm struggling to get by right now. Or you could say, I'm down to the last $20 in my bank account. Obviously, this one is more transparent. It's giving you the exact line item budget or like the exact balance of your bank account. That is extremely transparent, but neither of these are inauthentic. These could both be completely true. And by the way, you don't have to necessarily talk about struggling with your bank account, but this is just a really good way to illustrate this point. Authenticity is sort of a binary. You either are or you're not, yes or no. Transparency is more of a spectrum. You can be some level of transparent. So even by virtue of talking about my personal finances, I am being fairly transparent. But if I give you the actual breakdown of my finances, that's very transparent. I don't have to be all the way on that end of the spectrum. I can be wherever I want. The spectrum exists inside of sort of your authenticity. If you say, yep, I'm going to be myself, it's like, okay, now to what level are you comfortable with sharing and giving that insight? So now I want to talk about your box, which is a concept that I've also formed recently. People really love heuristics. They love shortcuts. They love being able to describe things succinctly by comparing them to other things. They kind of create these mental anchors to other concepts, and they compare you directly to those anchors so they can explain or understand concepts very, very quickly. So let's say you look like Paul Rudd. If somebody says, let's say also that your name is Jack. If you're talking about your friend Jack, and they say, wait, who's Jack again? you're going to anchor your concept of Jack to Paul Rudd because it's easy for you to both understand and explain and have someone else understand quickly. And you say, oh, you know, Jack, the guy who looks like Paul Rudd. And that's sort of this box that people make. That's sort of a heuristic people tie to. Similarly, if you knew a lot about Bitcoin, you talked about Bitcoin all the time, they may say, oh, you know, Jack, the guy who knows a lot about Bitcoin. When people try to relate an answer to somebody else, they want to do so quickly, and they want to do so in a way that they feel confident the other person is going to grasp onto and understand quickly. And so people will put you into a box to sort of explain you. When people say, you know, Jack, the guy who knows a lot about Bitcoin, that's them kind of defining your brand, your defining characteristics. The opportunity here, because we don't love doing the work of creating a box, when I think about Jack and someone says, who is Jack? I have to jump through these mental hoops to explain who you are. And if I haven't done that before, I have to create that mental model on the fly of who you are. I have to do that work of anchoring and creating this relation between you and Paul Rudd. And I don't necessarily want to do that because we're lazy. We don't like doing mental gymnastics. And so the opportunity is for you to create your own box so that you can give that box to somebody else, to the people around you, so that when they're talking about you, they don't have to do the work, the mental gymnastics of defining you. They can already have on call in their brain bank the answer to who is Jack. So let me give you an example. And look at the shiny box. Wouldn't you rather be this box than the plain cardboard box? You can create that. Otherwise, someone's going to create a cardboard box for you. It can double as your elevator pitch too. So if somebody asks you, what do? You can say, hi, I'm Jack. I'm sort of a craft beer encyclopedia. Or you can say, hi, I'm Jack. I'm a blockchain expert. At the beginning of the slide deck, I said, I'm Jay. I'm a writer and community builder. So putting that all together, you have an opportunity to define your box. That box can be related to what your brand promises. What can people expect every time they interact with you? What is that promise that you're fulfilling? And then you can put that into a format that you give to people and say, I'm a writer and community builder, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to be your box, you can define that, deliver it to them, and then start thinking about, okay, now that this is my box and I'm promising this, how do I deliver on that promise? How do I live up to being a craft beer encyclopedia? How do I live up to being an expert on blockchain? Be consistent with solving that problem, with being the solution and fulfilling that promise. Be congruent with your voice across channels, whether that's blogging, whether that's social media, whether that's YouTube, whatever it is. Determine what level of transparency you're comfortable with and sharing. And I would recommend, again, you don't have to do this, but I would say present yourself authentically. So all of that becomes a little bit easier. And I can help you do that. So I'm going to get to your questions here in a moment, but this is my proposition to you for how I can help you do these things. I can work with you directly to help get control of your personal brand. I'll work with you one-on-one. We'll do a series of 4 calls. I can help you determine what your current brand looks like, doing sort of an audit of what your current promise is in people's mind. Do an audit of your current online representation. I can help you determine your strengths and weaknesses of your existing brand, the things that are in place and maybe you like, maybe you want to keep there, and the things that maybe you don't like as much, maybe you want to take them out. I can help you find clarity in defining and sharing your own interests, expertise, and aspirations. And in that way, we can define your new brand promise. We can put a box together for you. We can define the box we want to share with people, the tool set. We can create a go-forward plan to build upon that brand using that foundation. So the way that would look, 4 calls. We can do them once a week. The first call would be an introduction between you and me. We talk and we discover your interests, your background, your aspirations. We do a discovery of your current brand in people's minds and how we can go get that information from your friends and people around you. The second call would be an audit and interpretation of your current online presence. I would do some work beforehand, and we go to that call, and I'd say, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm taking away from it. How can we get this to be more aligned and consistent with what you actually want to be your brand promise? And again, we'll look at your strengths and weaknesses in both of those areas to see, here's what we keep, here's what we got to work on. Call number 3 is putting clarity around your new brand promise and defining your box, the things that you want to be known for. Call number 4 is then a plan going forward. Now that you have this box, what's the next plan? Do we want to focus on Instagram? Do we want to build up an email list? Do we want to blog? Do we want to do YouTube? What is the medium and what is the message? And how do we move forward and leverage this new brand that we've put in place intentionally for ourselves? If you want to do that, it's just a one-time payment of $200. That's 4 calls up to an hour each. I would say week over week, but if you want to spread them out, we can do that too. And here's that summary again. 4 calls, determining what your current brand looks like, doing an audit of your friends, your online presence, determining what your strengths and weaknesses shown are so that we can maximize on the strengths, minimize the weaknesses, find clarity around your interests and your expertise so that we can define your new brand promise, define your box, and create a go-forward plan to build upon that foundation. So I'll get to the questions here. If you want to take that next step and work with me one-on-one on that, just go to jklaus.com/brand. It's not a sexy landing page as much as I wish that it was. Still kind of MVP in that, but just goes to a PayPal. Once you put that down, I'll connect with you personally. We'll get a plan for our 4-call cadence, and we'll go from there. But love to work with you. I think it'd be a lot of fun. As I said, I've been doing this for a little bit, and I have a lot of fun doing it. I've helped some people do it kind of ad hoc, and I like to think I have a little bit of a playbook. So let's get to your questions. I'm going to defocus this. And if you guys have more questions, feel free to enter them in the Ask a Question box. So the first question was, thoughts on blogging as a means of personal branding? So I think blogging, as I said, blogging has been amazing for me. And I think it is super, super valuable for sharing your message. But what a lot of people do, as I kind of alluded to, one, they aren't congruent with the way they talk on their blog versus how people interact with them online, even sometimes Facebook and Twitter. All of a sudden, when people are writing in a word processor or on a blog format, they just change the way they talk and become super flowery and weird. And people say, this isn't who you are. This isn't how I experience you. And it feels weird reading this. I don't take it seriously. So if you can be congruent with the way you talk and you have a message that you want to share, I think blogging is great. It's also worth considering whether blogging is the right medium for your message, because you may find that it's easier for you to sit in front of a camera like this and just share a 20 to 30 minute monologue on an idea and upload it straight to YouTube. And that may be how people connect with it better. If you're not great at writing, you don't have to blog. Maybe you do a podcast, maybe you do the YouTube. There are a lot of ways to do it. But I have found that writing is a really good way to build an audience around a message if you know what your message is and if you have a message you want to share. Because the other thing is, if you're just doing all of your posting on Facebook or even Medium, that platform owns your audience. It's harder to insulate yourself against changes in that business's success. If you build an email list, I'm willing to bet that email is going to be around for a while, and it's a lot easier for you to communicate personally one-on-one with people via email and a blog than depending on a third-party platform that can change the way and who sees your message sort of on the fly. So I hope that answers your question, and if it doesn't, ask a follow-up. If I frequently feel that I should be more active on social media, Twitter specifically, but also other platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But I'm afraid of sinking too much time for less than stellar results. How can you measure ROI on social media? To be completely honest, Kevin, I'm not sure you can measure ROI on social media, but in any situation, to measure ROI, you've got to know sort of what your intended results are. So if you're looking at, I think I should be spending more time on Twitter and Facebook, my question is why? Like, what are you trying to gain as a result of that? And if you do have an intended result, if your result is more sales of an ebook or more sales of some platform or more followers, those are things you can measure, and you can probably tie pretty directly Twitter followers, the amount that you post on Twitter. But if it's just for sort of brand building, I think that's looking in the wrong place, because for you to build a brand, you have to start sort of at the core, like the whole presentation was about, and look at what is the way people are interacting with my brand right now. What are they receiving? How do people feel about it? And understand if that's what you want. Because if you're not getting the results you want from that, if people aren't interacting with your brand in a way that makes you happy, you got to change that first before you start trying to interact with more people. Because in a lot of ways, social media is just an amplification of touch points. I'm a little old school on this, or just contrary, I guess. But when I think about like my email list audience, it's totally secondary to what I'm doing with Unreal or the other work that I do. Because to me, I want my audience to be pretty high touch and personal and have good interactions with me. I'm on some email lists that have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and they make a ton of money doing it, selling products. But I get their emails and it's just like, it's very transactional. I feel like I have no real connection to this person. I feel like I'm part of a numbers game. It's just not what I want. I prefer the people that I connect with personally and work with to be a lot closer to me, to have more high touch with me, and to have more trust in me. So Kevin, let me know if that was helpful or if you have follow-ups to that too. Okay, question number 3. Thoughts on corporate branding versus personal branding. So Karen, I'm going to answer this in terms of, when you say corporate, do you mean specifically like a level of business or just a business in general? And in either case, a lot of the core is still true. People have been talking about your brand promise for a long time in the world of physical products and businesses. And it's told a lot through the lens of Procter & Gamble, because they've been really, really good at it for a very long time. They were the people that discovered, or like kind of told the story that like Tide, the laundry detergent, the brand promise of Tide wasn't that you had clean clothes necessarily. The brand promise was that you were a better mother and a better spouse. And so that sounds kind of esoteric, but it's kind of at the core of what I'm talking about here, as far as promises go. So whether it's a product, a business, or yourself, you still need to think about what is my brand being hired to solve? And again, I'm using hired kind of loosely, but what is the problem that my brand is being brought on to solve for people? And that's same across channels. So I'd also say experiment on social media. On Instance Day, I start browsing out business development. Okay, cool. Yeah, all this you can experiment with. Let me get to Alexis's question real quick, and I'll hit some more for you, Karen. Oops, it just invoked my echo. That was 4 calls, right? 4 hours total, yes. 4 calls, 4 hours total, spaced out over a month. And if you know me, I rarely am stingy with my time. So like the reality is I'm gonna do some homework before the calls, follow up with you after the calls. Really, I'm promising my attention for about a month, but the calls themselves, I'm saying, yeah, we'll schedule up to an hour 4 times for 4 weeks. What is the most successful content platform that has worked to build your brand? Honestly, for me, that's been Facebook. And that was super accidental. But there was a period of time where I was very, very intentional still, but in a bad way, of keeping my Facebook life and persona separate from sort of my persona in the community. And that was back when I was in college. And I was starting to introduce myself into the community here locally in Columbus and meet a lot of like pretty awesome, influential people and change makers. And at the time I was like, I'm a college student and I'm just still kind of a shithead. And so I need to keep up this front of being older and more knowledgeable and more mature anytime I can have any interaction with these people. And so I didn't add them on Facebook. I was very buttoned up and kind of tight when I was around them in public. And then on Facebook, I was just sort of my normal self around my friends. And I've completely flipped that on its head. Anybody that I meet, I add on Facebook and we become friends. Because, well, there's a couple of like very strong benefits to me personally. A, when I see somebody on Facebook, I began associating their name to a photo, and it makes me a lot better at names. And being able to recall someone's name when you see them on the street is so, so powerful. And it takes a little bit of work and practice, but when people say they're bad at names, like, it just means you're not trying and you're not caring enough. You're saying, I don't care enough about you to do the mental work of programming and rehearsing your name. I think that's kind of a shitty brand promise. So to me, I add people on Facebook because it helps me shortcut that process, but also I want them to have more touch points with my brand. I'm authentic across channels. My voice is congruent across channels now. So the more touch points I can have with somebody and show that I am consistent and I am me and I am somebody that you want to be friends with, the better. So Facebook, long answer to your question, Facebook has been phenomenal for me because I can share my thoughts very quickly. It actually ends up connecting other people to each other. I see a lot of people connecting just in the comments on my posts, which is kind of hilarious and amazing. And anytime you create a connection between two other people too, that is a win for your brand because they remember they're connected through you. Second most not a surprise is my email list. Writing every day and sending an email to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people every day has been crazy. I mean, just pure mathematically, the number of touch points I get to a large amount of people on a daily basis is crazy. So it's been really, really good. Every email itself, Kevin's on my email list. I send an email to Kevin every day, 5 days a week. If I was doing a weekly email, I would send him one email once a week. So what I'm doing now is I'm having 5 touch points with Kevin a week versus 1. And you multiply that over the 9 months that I've been doing it, or the 8 months I've been doing it, that's a big difference. That's a lot of me talking to Kevin. And it's been great. And I get people responding and they send it to other people. They introduce me to other people because I'm giving myself more opportunities to have more touch points with new people all the time, every day. Let's see, what else we got? Any opinion on how much I should focus on content creation when building my brand? I think two things. Once you have defined your brand promise and you feel like you have a good handle on the box that you want to put yourself into, you're saying, and also I should say this wasn't in the slide deck, your box should be a little bit aspirational. It should be something that you want to grow into and you want to be sort of longer term. Anyway, how much focus should you put in content creation around that brand? Once you feel like you know what that aspirational defined box is for yourself, this is who I am, this is who I want to be known as, this is the promise I'm fulfilling for people, you can do a ton of content because content is an incredible way, like I was just saying, to create a lot of touch points with people and to get your message in front of new people. What I've realized over 8 months of doing a daily newsletter is that content creation it's a war of attrition. Like, the people who win out are the people who just do it and do it and do it and do it. And so if you have it in you to do that every day, and trust me, it's not going to come, you're not going to write every day because you have inspiration. You're going to have inspiration because you write every day. So if you have the discipline and the mental fortitude to say, this is important to me and I'm going to do this, it doesn't have to be every day, just on some consistent basis. If it's once a week, do it consistently once a week. If it's twice a week, do it consistently twice a week. just be consistent so that people know when they're going to hear from you. They have sort of an implicit expectation of when they're going to hear from you next and get that next brand touch point. And just be consistent. So if you are interested in creating content, then yeah, do it all you want. If you're not interested in creating content, then don't force yourself to do it, because it's not going to be good and you're not going to be consistent, and it's not going to really serve you very well at all. Any personal branding or entrepreneurship book recommendations? To be quite honest, when I did that TEDx talk in 2013, I was pretty sold on the idea of writing a book, because there were almost no books on personal branding and there were no audiobooks on personal branding. I don't know what the state of that is now. I think there's probably been a few that have come out in the last 4 years. Man, but I really don't know. Anything by Seth Godin. Read anything you can get your hands on by Seth Godin. It's amazing. And it's all about marketing and authenticity and building tribes around who you are and the change you want to make in the world. His stuff is so good. So Tribes, The Icarus Deception, Purple Cow, anything by Seth Godin. Cool. I'm out of questions, folks. Does anybody have anything they want to throw in last minute? Sit here for a minute and drink some water. Did just get one that came in. This is great. You guys are great. Chris, Godin is spelled Godin, Seth Godin. If you just Google Seth, he's the first person that comes up. He has a daily blog and it's fantastic. Deep asks, how do you engage with an audience if you don't create content? I haven't created any content yet. So if I am building a website, what do I focus on? My question to you is, why are you building the website? And that's not to say don't. I just want to know what is your expectation of building that website? And what is your reason for wanting to build an audience? Not all people need an audience. Let me say that right now. And most people won't necessarily have an audience, especially not a large audience. You can think about personal branding just from the standpoint of, how do I interact with the people around me, my friends, my family, my coworkers on a daily basis? And how do I make that positive? Because having a positive personal brand in your company or within your family is going to elevate you in either of those situations. It's going to put you in a better place and give you more opportunity, because people are going to feel like they trust you inherently. So this isn't all about audience building. You don't necessarily need to do that. But you do want the people around you to have a positive perception of you and to feel like they can go to you to solve a specific problem, or to, whatever your brand promise is, to fulfill that. So to answer your question in a real way, let me see. Make sure I reread it and get it right. Engage with an audience if you don't create content. I would start with social media. Start with like a Facebook. You can even start on Medium. Like if you want to create content, then just start creating content. If you don't want to create content, how do you engage with an audience? You're not going to, probably. You can engage with the people that are around you on a daily basis and you're already having interactions with. But to engage new people, you probably have to create some new content and get your message out in the world some way. And you can do that through a website. You can do that through a blog. You can do that through Medium. You can do that through Facebook. You can do that through Twitter. But it's a slog. And if you're really trying to build an audience, you have to be consistent. If you're not necessarily trying to build an audience, but you still want to write sometimes, by all means, don't let me stop you. You could get some benefit from that. And I think any time that you write, it benefits you in the way that you're thinking. It also opens you up to new opportunities, because anyone that reads it could spawn some opportunity you didn't already think about. And Deep, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to ask a follow-up. Oh, I shouldn't have used your audience. Advertise myself. How do you advertise yourself if you don't create content? Here's some other tactical advice I give you. Can you give me more in context about why you want to advertise yourself? Is this for like employment? Is this for dating? Because you can go a couple different ways. I think you can share that website on social media. You can share that via email to people and say, hey, I built this website. Can you give me some feedback on it? Hey, I built this website. I'm looking to find a role in this position. Can you send it to anybody you think it can help? You're still going to have to go and get it in front of people and ask them to help share the opportunity probably. But you could just share that through the channels that exist right now. Employment. Yeah, if you're looking for employment, sorry, I'm going to dwell on this because this is important. In terms of employment, build your website, get it to speak to what problem you think that employer needs to solve. If they're looking for a product manager, it means they have problems managing time, managing teams. And so gear your website to solve that problem. Talk about that, talk about roles you've done in the past, and then get that in front of the people that will care. And it may not be creating content. It may be going on LinkedIn and finding the hiring manager at these companies that you're interested in and sending them a cold message and saying, hi, I'm Deep. This is my background. I think I'd be great for this position. Here's what I think I could bring to it. And here's some more information on my website. It could be just one-to-one instead of one to a lot. Suggestions on networking locally in Columbus with other entrepreneurial people. Glad you asked, Karen. Yeah, totally. Go, I don't know if you're in college. If you're in college, there's an organization called the Business Builders Club at Ohio State, which is amazing. Their events are technically public, so you could go whether you're in college or not. That website is businessbuildersclub.org. There is a Slack channel at startupcolumbus.com. And if you go into startupcolumbus.com, you can join our community Slack and you can meet people there. Otherwise, I would just go to events. Go on meetup.com. Look for types of things you're interested in. If it's analytics, if it's development, if it's design, if it's startups, a lot of that stuff's on Meetup. Go to those events. Find the people who look to be plugged in that are talking to a lot of people. Meet those people. Become friends with, create relationships with those people, and try to help, try to let them help plug you into the right people. Something I always recommend is when you meet somebody new, or even if you meet somebody old, if you're trying to expand your network, at the end of the meeting, first off, ask, how can I help you? Say, this has been great. Is there anything I can do to help you right now? I'm shocked consistently about how few people will ask that. But by asking that, it usually opens the door for them to reply and say, how can I help you? And then you can reply and you can say, oh, well, I'm trying to meet people in the design space or the photography space. If you know anybody that I could talk to, could you send an introduction? And let them connect you and just kind of go one-to-one, meet more people in an authentic way where you care about their interests and what they're doing, and build your brand that way. And that's the way that I got plugged in. It wasn't that intentional. It was just something I was kind of doing naturally, and it worked out. And so I've just sort of codified that to say that works. So yeah, I'd try that out. Man, you guys are so good on the questions. This is amazing. Thoughts on startup weekends? I've just been introduced the idea. I've been attending the BBC meetings recently, and you love it. Amazing. BBC is fundamentally like the most influential part of my college experience, and followed up by Startup Weekend. So I wouldn't have been organizing Startup Weekend for the last 5 years if I didn't love the event. I just facilitated an event in Indiana, in Lafayette, Indiana, a few weeks ago. 100%, if you've never done a Startup Weekend, I recommend everybody do one of them in their lifetime. It's phenomenal and super fundamental, again, to the way I thought about things. It just changes the way you interact with people. It's a great public speaking opportunity. It's great for getting yourself into the community because those events bring out a wide range of people in background, in industry, and in age. And it's phenomenal. The people that you meet at a Startup Weekend, you'll be shocked 10 years from now how many of them you're still in touch with. And the fact that you just met them at Startup Weekend. The long tail is impossible to qualify or quantify. And it's just been so amazing for me. So 100% recommend doing a Startup Weekend. Got another one from Kevin here. I've been struggling to phrase this appropriately and accurately, but how do you approach interacting with people or communities that you have moral or ethical problems with? So you're saying that you disagree with these communities. Are you trying to interact with them because you want to like address these problems, or you're trying to interact with them? Actually, I might be able to bring you on screen, Kevin, if that's helpful. Are you able to go on screen right now? I kind of want to try this out. I'm going to do it. I'm not sure it's working. How do I bring you up?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Amazing.
Hey. Yeah, no, that was like something I was really struggling to like type out, and because there's a lot of dimension to that. I think maybe more to the point, like it's not that I am trying to engage with those communities in huge ways, but I think it comes more down to like an issue of authenticity versus like how to be authentic, like how to authentically present like the ways that I feel are like positive or correct for the world to like kind of move and operate, like basically like how people should be treating each other at scale, and how to like how to communicate that without being, while being authentic but not being incredibly polarizing, basically.
I think I know what you're saying. So let me restate this and see if this makes sense. Is it like a situation where you're going to this, let's call it a meetup, because you have shared interests with the core of what that meetup is presenting on, and you know that you're going to be around some people that you disagree with morally or ethically, and you're going to be in conversations where you're having disagreements that you're going to have to either bite your tongue or step forward. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much about like interactions in the meet space as it is just like how much do you speak up, and how much do you say like, okay, maybe these people like aren't my people, and it's okay if I'm like not appealing to everybody. Because I think like, so I was like talking to a guy that I was like thinking about like kicking around some ideas for talks that I could do around some meetups around Columbus. And there's one, I'm really into Mike Monteiro, and he talks a lot about like ethics and design. And I think that there's like a really important conversation to be had around ethics in the digital space. But I don't know how to present that without, I don't want to be polemic about it, but I think that it's an important conversation to have. Like, how much do you allow your personal, like how personal does your brand, is it okay for that to be, like?
Well, my answer is, in any of those situations, I will not compromise being authentic. Like, I will not be dishonest, and I will not compromise my own beliefs. Mm-hmm. I will go out and say, like, at times I just don't share them because either it's not the point of what I'm trying to do, or I feel like it's not a battle that I can win at that point in time.
Yeah.
But, there is a lot of merit, and especially if you're trying to build a tribe, an audience, there are going to be a ton of people that aren't your people, and you got to let them go, and you got to be okay with that, and you got to be okay with criticism and people disagreeing, and like, that's natural. Like, if you don't have people that are disagreeing with you, then you just aren't taking any real stance on anything. Yeah. So totally worthwhile in recognizing that there are people that aren't your people, and you can take a stance for the things that you are fully behind, because you're not going to win everybody over no matter what your stance is. It's just a question for you in the moment, in that circumstance. Is it worth asserting that opinion versus just kind of rolling with the situation?
Yeah. No, I totally get that. That's a good thought. And I think that's generally what I hear. It's just like hard to sometimes gauge. I think it's kind of like it's kind of a dance. It's a balancing act, like figuring out like how much of your sort of inner life to like let out in your, your brand. I guess it's like the transparency thing I thought was really interesting when you were talking about that. That's like an incredibly good point. So
totally. All right, cool. Well, Kevin, thanks for asking. I'm going to drop you off.
No problem.
All right, guys. That's all for me. Like I said, I'll type this in here. If you guys want to move forward and work with me on talking about this further and sort of defining your box, this is the website to visit. Go from there. We'll get the first call on the books. We'll schedule out the rest of the 3 calls. I think it'd be a lot of fun, and I'd love to work with you. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for asking so many great questions. I will send out the replay of this to you guys as well. But yeah, if you're not already on the email list, feel free to join that too at jklaus.com. Otherwise, I'll talk to you maybe the next time I do one of these webinars. Thanks, guys.